Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Old friend Ben McKee of GoVols247 is back on the program. Ben, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Excited for what should be a fun weekend of college football, and hope you're doing well as well.
I hope it's going to be good, man. I'm just, you know what, I don't know if you're the same. I am just very grateful that it's not a 7:30 kick. The 3:30 is going to hit so nice on Saturday afternoon for me, and I don't know if it's the same for you.
No, it is the same for me. I do love kneeling at night, college football at night for that matter. The environments in the SEC are top notch, but from a work standpoint, not that many people care about that, but from a workage standpoint, it's not fun going to bed 2, 3 in the morning, and I've got 2 little ones. They're waking up 6:30, 7 o'clock. Regardless, I do like to go to church on Sunday mornings as well. And I prefer to be actually able to soak in what the pastor is preaching about and not trying to fall asleep instead. So I'm looking forward to a 3:30 start. I do hate that you don't really get to watch college football when it's in the middle of the day, when Tennessee plays in the middle of the day. You miss the noon slot, the end of the noon slot, and you miss the beginning of the night slot. So that kind of stinks, but from a work standpoint, I'm very excited about it this weekend.
Well, and look, the big game, Georgia, Texas, right after, so you can get our work done, and then we can jump in there for the nightcap. It's gonna be nice. Like you, man, when you're after midnight and you're like typing away and you're doing all this, and you're like, I'm not built for these night games. Like it's cool, but the 3:30, losing that 3:30 CBS luster this fall kind of scares me for what's to come, because if Tennessee keeps this thing humming for the next couple of years, we're going to be playing a lot of night games in Neyland and on the road for the next couple of years. So folks, better strap in, because that 3:30 spot on CBS is a thing of the past, and that's not even the biggest game. Like, it's crazy that the conversation this week was Tennessee and Alabama have struggled, so they got bumped from the night game, so they have to play the 3:30, and that's where you wanted to be in years past. It's really weird.
It is really weird. It's the second best game of the week, and I don't know that my mind has adjusted to that quite yet. I still think of 3:30 as being, I know primetime slot is actually 7, 8 o'clock window, but in SEC football world, 3:30 was the primetime slot. So I've had to readjust my thinking, and it hasn't quite set in yet. It's weird. I do like the triple header that they've got going on. I think that's a really cool deal that they've got going on. The 12 o'clock, which have been good games leading into the 3:30 and leading into the nightcap. That's a really cool triple header. And I'd be lying as an SEC person, somebody who grew up in SEC country and covers the SEC in a sense. I have found joy, I must admit, in seeing what SEC football has going on over on ABC, and then looking on the West Coast at the same time slot, and Brad Nessler or not Brad Nessler, but I guess it is Brad Nessler, isn't it? Calling it Gary.
Hey, get Nessler and Gary,
Yeah, Nessler and Gary calling USC and whoever, and there's like half the stadium's empty, and the score just does not look pretty. USC does not look pretty. They certainly are not getting the best games anymore.
No, and that's going to be interesting to follow over the next couple of years here, too, with the Power 2 breaking away more and more. And one of the things that I always wondered about, and I promise we'll get into Tennessee talk here, folks, but the Big Two, and I think Sankey and Pettetti and just the CFB big time, like television execs probably is the right person to target here. You can't fix the geography of the sport. And no matter what, Illinois has a ceiling that Tennessee does not, that Alabama does not. So when you move Purdue, there's just a football ceiling. There's a football ceiling at Iowa. There's a football ceiling at Nebraska. There's a football ceiling at Minnesota, that as hard as you try and as much as you prop up the Power 2, it's still like you brought in Oregon. They can. Like that's a real SEC type team. Like you look at how they're built, and Ohio State, Oregon was awesome on Saturday night. but the majority of that conference you just can't fix. And I just wonder if those are all going to be teams as we we go further and further down this rabbit hole of just radical change in college sports. I do wonder what happens, because like it's just, you can't win. Like a lot of these kids who like are 4 and 5 star kids do not want to go play in Illinois. They don't want to go play in Iowa. So I don't know how you legislate that out. Like USC is a winner here. Oregon is a winner here. It's cool schools to play for. That'll be fine. Washington, that's still cool on the West Coast. Seattle, but you're not going to get these kids. Like it's just, it's never going to happen. You know what I mean? I just don't know what they do about that, because geography just can't win there.
Yeah, and I know we're talking about football, but we've seen SEC basketball really blossom, and the fan bases really blossom with basketball, and we're seeing it with baseball as well to a lesser extent. And I
another geography problem in baseball.
Yes, the biggest geography probably of all the sports. But I think Big Ten football is very similar to SEC basketball. Well, I'm making the case that it's not. Like with SEC basketball, there's always the possibility of growth if you gave fans a legitimate, entertaining, energized product to watch. Because sure, the South may be football fans first and foremost, but what they love most after football, maybe even more than football, I should say, is the school itself. You still have that following, that fan base. So when Tennessee blows up in baseball, yes, the South and baseball is popular down here, but Tennessee fans are going to support anything that is winning or given a reason to that has Tennessee across their chest. And there's a lot of schools like that inside of the SEC. I don't think that's really the case with football, with some of those Big Ten schools that you mentioned. I don't think that there's possible growth in Big Ten football like we've seen with SEC basketball. Their secondary sport compared to the SEC secondary sport. I just don't see that room for growth. And I kind of think some of the additions are overrated as well, to be quite honest. And mostly USC. It's still a polarizing brand, I guess, but I just there's not a following out there. And to me, the individual school's following is kind of what sparks TV ratings and potential growth and things of that nature. And I think the Big Ten, like, yes, USC is a good brand to have. I'm not saying it's not. I just don't think it's what the Big Ten thinks it's getting.
Yeah. Speaking
it's
of
not
baseball,
on Michigan level to me.
No.
Michigan, Ohio State, it's like a tier down, but they're not talked about in that manner or broadcasted in that manner.
Right. And like, to put a bow on it, Ole Miss can have these runs where they could actually transfer portal their way and recruit just well enough away to win a national title if all breaks right. You can't really do that at Illinois. Like, you can't transfer portal your way and still get enough to kind of run the gauntlet and win a national title. Like, that's just not going to happen for 2/3 of the Big Ten. And I just don't think you can ever fix it, because the buy-in will never, the talent plus buy-in will just never be there to make it as even, I think, as the Power 2 want it to be, unless you do changes in terms of who's in the conference and who's not. Because that there are Big 12 and ACC teams that could, like a Miami, a Clemson, maybe even in North Carolina. There's a lot of talent. Tennessee owns the state of North Carolina on the recruiting front, but that shows there's a lot of talent in that state. Tennessee going in and get the number 1 player multiple times over in that state. So switching gears here, you brought up the baseball aspect of this, and I wanted to pick your brain here. It's the baseball guy. You're doing big time baseball spots, Ben McKee, and it's very cool to see. And one of the things that I want to kind of pick your brain on, because someone asked me the other day about like the early scrimmage starts for Tennessee, and one of the weirder things about college baseball that is not the case when we're covering football or basketball, like some of these guys are just not going to disappear. Like some of the fall, you're just it's kind of like open tryouts in a lot of ways, and it's at a college level, so it's just a little weird that's the case. So I'm keeping up with your notes over there on GoVols247 and reading through that, and it's fascinating to me because you're like, okay, well, how much do I make of this? And then I'm like keeping track, and I'll like go back to your earlier articles, and I'll be like, okay, he's now at this point, so maybe he is going to make it to the spring and be a fixture. Who, from what you've seen thus far, have been some early scrimmage stars for Tennessee this fall?
Well, I had 2 things to say. A, I'm just trying to keep up with Ryan Shumpert over at Lindsey Nelson Stadium.
Don't prop up Ryan anymore. We don't. He gets enough pub on this podcast. We don't have to do it.
I'm about to throw him under the bus. He's a snitch. first and foremost. He is a snitch. He's low down. He's dirty. You can't trust him.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm surprised that you did not lead off this conversation about Chaz Nimrod, based off of
oh no,
some
I wasn't gonna do this. I wasn't gonna do this, Ben.
No, I know it's all good.
He's told you about the lawsuit.
Yes, he told me about the lawsuit. He told me that you are suing me. No, I'm kidding. That's more fun banter than anything else, of course. But baseball it's fun to watch them in the fall just because there's so much talent on the field, and it is a very interesting dynamic because there is the thought in the back of your head, well, all these guys can't play. And I mean, Tennessee goes, they just have so many guys and so many guys that would have started for Tony from day one that look good, but they're just never going to sniff the field here because of the level that they're recruiting at, both in the high school ranks and now with what the portal has become. You bring in an Andrew Fischer. Ariel Antigua deserves to be a starting middle infielder in the SEC, but he's probably not going to be because you have Dean Curley, who was an All-American as a freshman that helped lead Tennessee to a national championship at shortstop, and then they go out and get Gavin Kylan from Louisville, and whoever doesn't play shortstop is going to be at second. And it's like, okay, Ariel is more than good enough, especially defensively, to play in the SEC, and there's just not a spot for him right now. And not to suggest that Ariel won't ever play at Tennessee. I think that he will as long as he stays the course and continues to develop. But there's this thought in the back of your head of like this freshman that nobody really knows about, or this second-year player that redshirted last year. He looks good swinging the bat right now, but I just don't know if he's ever going to get at bats here. So it's almost like a forbidden topic amongst college baseball coaches. They don't want their numbers out there. Because it is, in a way, a tryout, and there's a lot of guys on the roster. They don't want to run guys off prematurely. They're also recruiting, so they don't want recruits to see the number situation. And college baseball coaches are in a really tough spot because the rules of the sport put them in this position to operate in the manner that they are operating. They're doing the best that they can with the rules that they have been given. And now all of a sudden you're going to potentially, it looks like they're going to cut it down to 34. And it's like, how in the world are we going to have, especially from one drastic end, which they're dealing with this fall, to potentially the deep end of the pool next fall to where you can only have 34 guys. It's like, how do we get our numbers down? And then what do we do on the recruiting front? So it's a really tough spot for college coaches to be in. But there's a lot of guys impressing right now. Andrew Fischer has looked the part. Defense is a question with him. Tennessee's confident in what he can be defensively, but at the end of the day, he's somebody that can hit 30 home runs this season, especially in Lindsey Nelson. Dean Curley's looked like Dean Curley. Hunter Ensley's looked like Hunter Ensley. Gavin Kylan's looked good coming over. I've been really impressed with Liam Doyle on the mound, the Ole Miss transfer. I think he's going to end up being Tennessee's Friday night game one starter. He just had, his stuff is filthy. High velo, and he's a good kid, but he has an arrogance to him when he is pitching. He kind of has that stuff to him that Tony likes out of a Friday night starter that kind of sets the tone for the weekend. He's been very impressive. And speaking of some of the newcomers that have impressed, Levi Clark, a highly touted freshman, took him deep yesterday at the scrimmage. He swung the bat really well. I was listening to Tony speak with John Wilkerson and Vince Ferrara on his weekly hit, and he mentioned Levi and Jay Abernathy as kind of the two freshman bats that are really standing out right now. And those are the two guys who have been most impressive in terms of the young bats. You've had some others, Brooks Wright, who went to Bearden High School. He's really swung the bat with some power these first 2.5-3 weeks. But Jay Abernathy probably been the one that I've been most impressed with out of the freshman bats. He's always doing something. He has an electric.
Who does he remind you of?
He is he's Jay Charleston, Seth Stevenson with a better hit tool. He's a more complete hitter, a more explosive hitter. He has the speed of Jay Charleston and Seth Stevenson, but just better tools in the box. Stevenson more of a contact hitter, but Jay, also a contact hitter. I mean, he's not going to hit, I don't think, 20, 25 home runs in a season, but he's just going to pepper the ball all over the field. I have seen him go deep off the scoreboard, but he's just explosive, just a heck of an athlete, can play all over the field. He's signed as an infielder, but he's been playing a lot of left field right now because there's not an obvious choice in left field at the moment. And
Has Tony played a true freshman outfielder as a starter yet? I don't recall one, right?
Maybe Beck got in there. That would have been what Beck's COVID. The COVID year was Beck's and Gilbert's freshman season, though, right? When those, I think that the COVID year was their freshman season. I think they started some games, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go double check, but I think they were talked about in the same manner as Jay Abernathy was. So Jay can play all over the field. Again, he's just an explosive athlete, a ton of speed. Just sprays the ball left field, center field, right field. If it's in the gap, he's a threat to get the third. I've seen him hit a couple of triples, seen him hit it off the scoreboard. He's going to be a fan favorite just because he's a really, really exciting player, and he's a true freshman. But I think Tennessee's going to have a hard time keeping him out of the lineup.
Is he can get out in 2, or is he a 3-year guy?
I believe he's a 3-year guy, but don't quote me on it. This last class had several guys who were, because of their age, are sophomore eligible for the draft, like we've seen with Dylan Dreiling, like Dean Curley is this year. Tegan Coons, Ensign Seibert, those guys are 2-year guys if all goes according to plan. I think Jay is a 3-year guy, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, that's confusing. It's like one of those things. I mean, Tony's talked about it too, I think, where the 3-year, like, it's just I think he talked about like the SEMO Blake Burke thing is just not going to be the norm. Like those guys, like getting 3 years with guys of that talent is a rarity, but it also shows like you can still get drafted really high if you stay in the program for 3 years. You have to wait, but it was cool to see that natural progression. They both got better each and every year with bigger roles and bigger responsibilities and more tape. That's the other part that people overlook. It's just like it's harder to continue to be good in the best conference in college baseball. It's just there's so many plate appearances that teams can scout and look at, and just, I mean, you're just not going to see that kind of development as often as I'm sure Vitello and other SEC coaches would like, because it's really cool to see guys like Burke and SEMO develop and turn into superstars in year 3.
Yes, it absolutely is. Now, I would say that the ones that the coaches are currently kind of frustrated about in terms of the direction college baseball is going with the roster limits is the Trey Lipscombs are no longer going to exist. Burke and SEMO, the Tennessee benefited, I think, from COVID shortening the draft there. And I think if the draft is what it was at one point, then maybe those guys get signed. Although just because the draft is longer doesn't mean that they're going to get the money that they were wanting to get while going through that process. But I do think that maybe COVID and everything going on in the sport helped them at the time with that. And I do think it has become more often that these elite high school players would rather come to high school and play in the SEC for 3 years, get developed, and then go, instead of playing in the middle of nowhere, single A baseball, rookie ball somewhere. And it's much more fun to play in the SEC right now and get developed in the process. So I think that's become a trend as well in college baseball. But you're right. I mean, Tennessee got a little lucky there with being able to have Moore and Burt for 3 years. But in talking to some of the coaches, they're more bummed out about losing the Trey Lipscombs, the Cortland Lawsons, the Kavaris Tiers, those guys, the true guys who sat from their first year, second year. Hunter Ensley, those type of guys are probably going. But
do you think they're all gone, or just gonna be less of them?
I think almost all are gonna be gone. I don't think with what the roster numbers are going to look like, if it truly does go down to the 34, which I think is on the cusp of officially being official, then I don't think Trey Lipscomb or Hunter Ensley or those guys that I mentioned, I don't think that they either make it to Tennessee, or if they do make it to Tennessee, then I don't know that they stick it out at Tennessee. So they're not going to completely go away, but I think it's going to be very, very rare for sure.
Well, speaking of Lipscomb and Hunter Inslee and those guys, I mean, who do you think is this year's Trey Lipscomb, Hunter Inslee, guys who's been in the program for a while now? Is it Colby Backus? Is it Reese Chapman? Who are the obvious candidates to break out in 2025 as someone who's been in the program for a while that just hasn't got that big time opportunity that they might be in line for this spring?
Yeah, to me, it's Reese Chapman. It's Reese Chapman. It's Dalton Bargo, Cannon Peebles, and I realize that they're in their second year at Tennessee, but they're in their third year playing college baseball because they transferred after their freshman year at their previous schools. Those three, and you can throw Colby Backus in there as well. And I mean, I would right now, if I was writing out a lineup projection, I would put Backus out in the outfield, probably in left with Inslee and Chapman next to him in center and right. I think he'll at least be the opening day left fielder, and they trust him defensively. For Backus, it's all about can he consistently hit, and he can hit fastballs, but can he hit the breaking ball? That's what's usually gotten him in trouble and what's led to him not maintaining a role or winning a role. And he'll have Jay Abernathy nipping at his heels. He'll have Levi Clark, who signed as a catcher, could play first. Could be the DH. He's been out in left field some as well. They're just trying to find a spot for him to
Where
get in.
Do you think he's most comfortable?
I would say catcher, but right now they're trying to just get him on the field in any way possible because
you got Stone Lawless there too, right? Like it's kind of crowded at catcher a little bit.
Very, very crowded. Because everybody thinks Stone's going to be catching. Stone will catch, but like Cannon Peebles is your starting catcher and going to catch the majority of the time. He's had a nice fall as well. I've seen him last week. He took Doyle, who I raved about earlier. He took him deep to left center off the top of the porches in left center. And Peebles hit a home run yesterday or the day before. All the scrimmages are starting to run together now. But Peebles has looked good, and they like Peebles. They think he's in a better mindset coming into this year. He's really hard on himself. He still is hard on himself, but too hard on himself, just too emotional, overreacting to failure, and they needed him to settle down in that regard, and I think he's matured a lot. So Peebles is going to catch the majority of the time, but Stone's going to play a lot because he's one of your best bats. It's just a matter of he'll catch every now and then to give Peebles a break, but I think
could he lead in DH opportunities?
DH first as well. So Levi is he's obviously got some older catchers in front of him, but he could, very similar to Stone, can catch, play first, DH obviously, and then he's a little more fleet of foot, so you can stick him out in left field and it not be foreign to him or just look completely out of place. And it's not all that hard to play left field in Lindsey Nelson Stadium, if we're being honest. So they're just trying to get his bat in the lineup. But those guys that are going to be the next Kavares Tears, Trey Lipscomb, I think it's those older guys who have not solidified a role up until this point in their college career. Colby Backus, Reese Chapman, who he hit one last week, that parking lot out behind right field. I think I was sitting in the left field corner, so I didn't see exactly where it landed, but I would guess it landed in the back of that parking lot right before the frats. I mean, he absolutely demolished the baseball. He's looked good this fall, has hit the ball really well. Stone's looked good, or Peebles has looked good. Bargo looked good to start. He's out right now. He's dealing with a couple of broken fingers that he took from a foul tip while catching. So that's unfortunate that he's going to miss some time here because he needs reps as well. But those are the four guys that I look at as being those breakout guys, those great stories of waiting their turn, developing, and then bursting onto the scene. And if I had to put my money on somebody, it would be Reese Chapman to make the most noise out of that core group of guys.
I love it. Final baseball thing. We'll transition here. Two-parter here for you. Where do you think Andrew Fischer is ultimately going to play every day? Because the bat, like you said, it's just he's going to rake Lindsey Nelson. And like I guess this is kind of like the other part of this is like how much better, or how much would you compare where he's at third base to where Billy Amick was when he came in a year ago? Because I think that's going to be the comps with a lot of Tennessee baseball fans, is when him coming in here from Ole Miss and Billy could hit, and then there was the third base questions, and it didn't matter. Tennessee won a title with Billy Amick at third. I wonder if that's the recipe there is you need to see it for a while first before you go away from that, is part one I'm curious about for you, Ben. And then part two, You have Liam on Fridays. Who is Saturday and Sunday right now for you?
With Fischer, he's going to play third, and we'll see how he performs. Ole Miss did go away from Fischer at third base towards the end of their season. So I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little bit skeptical of him being able to stick over there defensively. But it to me, and I haven't been able to watch a ton of Fischer these last 3 weeks. Are the first time I've really ever consistently watched him. Obviously, I was aware of him last year, but I was not watching him every single game that he played like I will be now. And he's made some great plays over there. I don't 10, 11 scrimmages in, I don't recall him making an error. He's looked the part over there. I don't think he's going to set the world on fire. I also don't know that he's going to be a defensive liability as well. But it does feel very similar. I would argue go back 2 years to Zane Denton as well. This is the third year in a row where a transfer third baseman has arrived. And I guess Zane didn't arrive with defensive questions because he was technically an all-SEC defensive player, all SEC defensive team at Alabama. But he never quite, in my opinion, lived up to the defensive billing that he arrived with. And then Billy, we obviously watched that one play out last year. And then Fischer kind of is Billy 2.0, just power from the left side of the plate this time instead of the right side of the plate. But we'll see how it plays out. Again, it's going to be up to Fischer. I saw him. Tony loves to shift the infield around and play guys at multiple spots just because you never know what may happen and injuries, and you may need to slide a guy here or there. And early on in one of the first scrimmages, Fischer was over at second and made a heck of a diving stop and got to his feet and made the throw to first. So Tennessee has been consistent in their talking points to me of like, hey, we know Ole Miss kind of went away from him, but we think he can stick over there. He receives it. They have a big belief in his hands and being able to receive the baseball, and he has a powerful arm. So the worry inside the program is not, I don't know if I'd call it a worry outside of the program, but I'm frequently asked that question about Fischer's defense because Ole Miss did publicly go away from him. In terms of the pitching rotation, again, Doyle, game one, like you mentioned. Tegan Coons, I think, is going to be one of the other two starting pitchers. I just don't know whether that would be on Saturday or Sunday. And he's looked the real deal. He got a little hit up on Monday, I believe was the last time he pitched. And to me, it was more a result of Hunter Ensley hit a line drive off of him to lead off the third inning, and he was okay, stayed in the scrimmage. But he looked good in his first 2 innings. And then Hunter Ensley leads off his third and final inning with a line drive right off of him, and it kind of spiraled on him a little bit, gave up a lot of hard contact in that inning after that. So I would chalk that up as just kind of being shaken by Hunter Ensley there to lead off the inning. But outside of that inning, he's looked really, really good. Tennessee is really excited about him. It's premium stuff. They were thrilled that he made it to campus. They were very nervous about him not making it to campus. He's a 2-year guy, like I mentioned earlier, and he's the next Blade Tidwell. 2 years and done, as long as he stays healthy and everything goes according to plan, which I think that it will. But it is very fair, in my opinion, to put him in the Chase Burns, Drew Beam, Blade Tidwell, true freshman pitchers that impacted Tennessee right away. And Beam doesn't quite have the premium stuff that Burns and Tidwell has and does have, and I think Coons has more of the premium stuff that those two had. So I think he'll end up being a starter. The third one is much more up in the air. Just a lot of guys right now. I don't think Tennessee really has an idea either. Austin Breedlove is a JUCO guy that's looked good his last couple of outings when I've been there. I've heard good things about Tanner Franklin, who is an East Tennessee native and was at Kennesaw State. I haven't been able to see much of him. And a couple of guys like him, Sneed.
I was gonna say you haven't brought up Sneed. Is he like?
I think they're going to keep him in the
same
role. I think they're going to keep him in the same role. I think they like the role that they had him in.
Yeah.
I'm not completely ruling it out. I just don't get the gist that
if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. For him, the key will be developing a more consistent third pitch, and he's been throwing the slider more this fall, working on a slider to throw that more consistently. So who knows? Maybe if he starts to land that more often, then maybe he becomes and maybe I'm not giving it as much of a chance as maybe I should be. I think they really like him in that Swiss Army knife back in the bullpen type of role that we saw him carve out last year. But Breedlove, the JUCO kid, Tanner Franklin, Kennesaw State transfer who's from East Tennessee, he looked really good the other day. A couple of those guys, they didn't start throwing in scrimmages until this last week because they pitched into the summer ball long season last year, so they held off on a couple of guys like Tanner Franklin, who was excellent in the Cape Cod. Yeah. I would probably think that he might be the front runner for that third spot, and I could see a situation if it were him, then he starts game 2. Coons, the freshman, starts on Sunday. So those are some of the first.
Franklin does heat, right? He was the one who throws like high velo, right?
Yeah. This staff is going to look much more like the 2022 staff. I think, yes, I got my right. No, 23 staff is the one that I'm thinking of, which I guess 22 and 23 were pretty much the same one, but more premium velocity, bigger, more physical pitchers. Not going to be as finesse. This is going to look more like that 22, 23 pitching staff with Dolander and Burns. In terms of the stuff and the velocity, you're going to see much more of that. Dylan Loy, I could see him potentially starting, but I think they kind of like him almost like Snead in a Swiss Army knife role as well out of the bullpen, can pitch you multiple innings. But I could see him being the starter if somebody doesn't grab that third spot and grab the bull by the horns and take it and run with it, kind of like the fallback plan.
Andrew Lindsay kind of.
Yes, or what Xander did last year. Just when nobody would take that third job and run with it. Xander didn't pitch his best at the beginning of the year, but they trusted his experience, and I think they would trust Loy in a similar fashion. And if nobody else takes the job and runs with it, I could see him taking the job and running with it.
Is AJ Russell the ultimate wild card here?
Not in terms of being a starter, but in terms of the pitching staff.
So that ship sailed. Like, there's no chance he's a starter next season.
I would be stunned. I would be stunned. I don't know that Tennessee has ruled it out. I don't know that AJ has ruled it out. The timeline does not make sense. He's on track. He's feeling good right now. He threw for the first time last Monday, which was the 7th. Threw for the first time, and he said he felt good. I walked by him at one of the scrimmages and asked him how he was feeling. He said he felt great. Threw for the first time that week, and was feeling good. Was really excited to get back out there, and said he's on track. And the timeline from the jump, when I sat down and talked to him on the record in Omaha, he was targeting kind of March, beginning of April, beginning of SEC play is what I think in my head of the target date to get AJ back. And if that's when he gets back into game action, are you going to build him up as a starter at that point to where you hope that you have him in the postseason? I certainly think that may be an option. I just don't know that you would maybe, I don't know that rush is the right word, but I don't know that you would try to build him up to be a starter coming off of Tommy John. Yeah. And it's a draft year. Tony and Frank are overly cautious with guys in those situations. They don't want to deal with the blowback of costing AJ money, which is very smart on there. And of course, they care about the kid as well. They don't want to mess his future up. So I do think he's the wild card in terms of the ceiling of the pitching staff, because if AJ Russell was healthy, make no bones about it, like he would be the best. He would have been the best pitcher on Tennessee staff last year. That's why he started opening night. He would start opening night this year and be Tennessee's best pitcher this year if he was going to be healthy the entire year. So I just don't think the timeline makes sense. I don't think it makes sense for a guy coming off Tommy John to come back middle of the year and then try to build him up as a starter. Now, if the pitching isn't going according to plan and you need a starter, then okay. I think they maybe reevaluate something. Or if you get into SEC tournament, NCAA tournament, you're dealing with some injuries or some guys are not trustworthy, then at that point, after he's been throwing for a couple of months, then you maybe extend him. But I don't see him being Garrett Stallings out there throwing 100, 110 pitches, 7, 8 innings every weekend. I think
I'd also just be cool him being the new, or just being Joyce for a year.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think they're going to have, like, you know, they had Sean Hunley and then they Redmond Walsh and Camden Sewell and then Nate Snead came on last year. I think they're going to have Aaron Combs as well. Speaking of, Aaron Combs' little brother is filthy. He's another guy that's been very impressive when I've been out there. He looks just like Combs. The mannerisms while he's pitching is 2.0. Yeah. Doesn't throw the filthy curveball that older brother throws, but he has a filthy changeup that has fooled some good Tennessee hitters this fall. So he could be a nice bullpen piece that I saw some comments that, I didn't even realize Aaron Combs' little brother was on the team.
Yeah.
So I think he's maybe the one to keep an eye out on that fans don't know right now, but will know in the spring.
Is there a third Joyce or no? Are the Joyces done? No more Joyces?
Yes. They've I mean, Marcus Phillips throws premium gas, but
Man, I forgot about Marcus Phillips.
He's not throwing
Yeah.
Nate Snead throws gas. He's not throwing Ben Joyce gas.
Yeah.
There is no other Ben Joyce. Zach Joyce was not Ben Joyce in that regard. But my final thought on the pitching was that, they had Sewell and Hundley and Redmond, all these Swiss Army knife, 2 to 3 inning, close out the game type guys. I think they're going to have multiple guys that can do that. If it Marcus Phillips and Nate Snead and AJ Russell coming back, and Thomas Crabtree's a JUCO arm that we didn't mention who had some big time stuff. Like they have 3-4 Dylan Loy if he's in the bullpen. They're going to have some strength back there and several guys that can fill that Sean Hundley, Camden Sewell type of role. And Marcus has looked good as well. He got a little hit up yesterday when I saw him pitch. The command, that's always going to be the question with Marcus. His stuff looks really, really good this fall, and his command has been more consistent than I saw a year ago. But that's what it's going to boil down to for Marcus. If he can consistently control the strike zone, he's going to be one of the nastiest pitchers in the SEC.
I love it. On the basketball front here, Ben, a couple quick questions for you. So I'm trying to figure out, where are they going in terms of this class? Because I think what's so interesting about where basketball is right now for men's hoops is this year just feels like the last dance for this Tennessee run. And I wonder if you agree with that, you're going to have a lot of turnover after this year. And this is Ziegler moving on after being a 4-year starter. Chaz is gone. Igor's gone. Darlinstone's gone. Jamai's gone, who's another just longtime stalwart Barnes disciple, perfect Barnes player. Like, you are getting a little bit of that this year without Josiah and Santi in the room. But next year, it's just Akpara just looking around like, who am I playing with? And yeah, you could backfill with the portal a lot like you did this past season. But my gut and my instinct here, looking at who Tennessee's targeting and how they're approaching this upcoming recruiting class versus the past ones where they're taking a guy, they're not going to reach on anybody. It seems like they're going heavy to do a rebuild and reload type deal. Is that kind of the read you've gotten, and that fans need to be prepared that they're going to take a lot of several guys, and that there might be not a full-on teardown, but there's a rebuild coming after this year is what it seems like to me. Are you sensing the same?
Yes, I would say that they're reloading. I don't think they're going to be rebuilding. I think they'll be reloading, because I don't think when it's all said and done that there will be a drop off in talent. There will probably be a drop off in experience, but there won't be a drop off in talent. It'll look completely different. This will be what, version 3.0 of the Rick Barnes era. You have Grant Admiral, aside from like the random Kevin Punter, Armani Moore year, and then you had the random John Fulkerson and Jordan Bowden year. Like, aside from those one-off years in which they were rebuilding, in those, I don't think that you'll see a rebuild next season like you saw, I guess it was those first 2 seasons under Rick with those older guys I mentioned, or the rebuild year with Folke and Bowden. I don't think that you'll see that next year. Not a guarantee, but I would be surprised if, like, those teams weren't tournament teams. Tennessee will have a tournament team next year.
There's not going to be a preseason, like, maybe win the SEC. Like, that's not the expectation next year.
But they'll be preseason top 25. They'll be picked to finish, I bet, in the top 5 of the SEC, and they'll be a tournament team. You have Felix coming back. They're super excited about Felix. I think the key for the next era of Rick Barnes at Tennessee, which is probably his last, the home stretch of the Rick Barnes era, if I had to guess, it's JP Estrella, it's Cameron Carr. Like, though the staff loves both of them. They think the world of both of them. They think the sky is the limit with Cameron Carr and JP Estrella. There's obviously been a lot of talk about Cameron Carr. I think the last time you had me on, we talked about Cameron Carr. I think people have forgotten about JP Estrella as well. This is the guy that Duke legitimately wanted, and he picked Tennessee over Duke. And he is so skilled as a big man. I don't think fans realize what Tennessee has in JP Estrella. And I'm not saying he's going to go out there and be all SEC this year. But my point is, by the time Cam's junior year and JP's junior year rolls around, those two guys need to be the players that Tennessee thinks that they're going to be in order for there not to be a drop-off. Because if you add Cam Carr and JP Estrella to Felix, I think Cade Phillips is going to be a very nice role player for Tennessee. I think he's John Fulkerson. He's just not going to be forced to start like John Fulkerson was at times. He can be that energizer off the bench, play good defense, go get rebounds, defend 1 through 5 if necessary.
Yeah,
I think Cade can be a nice role player. They've been pleased with Bishop Boswell and where he was at when he got here. I think Bishop was further along than they anticipated, and he's had a nice summer, which how could you not have a nice summer when you're thrown in the fire and having to deal with Zakai Ziegler every single day in practice? You're naturally going to get better. That core will determine just how good those couple of players turn out to be will determine the drop-off. But I do think ultimately it'll be a reload, not a rebuild, because they're recruiting really well right now. I think they are in position, and they feel like they are in position to sign arguably the best class that Rick has signed at Tennessee.
How many does that include, do you think?
I think 4 or 5. I think 4 or 5. You already have Dwayne Brown in the boat. He committed back during baseball season. He's from out of Hoover, Alabama, and I don't. He's more of a developmental guy. I would not look for him to.
Which is okay when you have Estrella sitting right there. Yeah,
absolutely. And Chris Cenac Jr., if you're able to land him, and theoretically he's a one and done guy, Dwayne Brown can come in if you're able to get Chris Cenac Jr. Across the finish line. You have Cenac next year. You have JP. You have Felix. Like Dwayne Brown can sit back and develop. And with Cenac, I think it's one that Tennessee fans have been very skeptical about, but Tennessee is a legitimate player in there. I wouldn't go as far as to say that Tennessee's the leader right now, but I would at least venture to say that they're neck and neck with anybody who is on his 7 lists of finalists. I think that they really enjoyed the visit last month to Knoxville. I believe the dad really, really enjoyed Rick Barnes in Tennessee. I think Junior really enjoyed Tennessee as well. Tennessee's absolutely in the thick of that one. And when I spoke to him coming out of his visit last month, he was talking about a spring decision. And now it's like, okay, early November. And I think that is great news for Tennessee. Early November, this time next month, there could be a lot of hay in the barn. You've got Amari Evans announcing on November 1st. He's a longtime Tennessee target. Mentally, he is Zakai Ziegler 2.0, which no coincidence that Amari grew up with the Ziegler family, with Amari's little, or with Zakai's little brother, playing in the same AAU program and going and watching Zakai play. I think Tennessee is in a great spot for that announcement on November 1st. And then November 2nd, you've got Isaiah Dennis, a top 50 overall player from over in the state of North Carolina. And he is the prototypical Rick Barnes recruit. Excellent kid. He was in here this past weekend for the Florida game. He really enjoyed his time. His mother, from my understanding, really enjoyed the visit as well, which always a good thing when mom approves. Very talented player, top 50 overall player in the country, and a great kid. Just exactly what you envision when you think of a Rick Barnes type of player. That one is not done, I would say, but I think Tennessee's in a great spot there as well. It came out this week that he is not going to take his Kansas visit that was scheduled for this weekend, and I think that is a great development for Tennessee. I think Tennessee was also keeping an eye on what he would do coming out of the visit, and maybe felt like what he decided to do with Kansas would be very telling of how the visit went. And he canceled his Kansas visit. So November 1st, November 2nd has the potential to be back-to-back really good days for Tennessee basketball on the recruiting trail. And if you get those two guards, if you get those two guys across the finish line, you get Dwayne Brown, you're able to get Chris Cenac in the boat. I mean, that's a 4 right there that's really, really good. A top 50 overall player in the country, a 5-star that I believe is a top 10 player in the country, the best big man in the country. And then you have some others out there. Braden Burries is a 5-star guard that Tennessee's absolutely in the mix for as well. He was supposed to be here this weekend for the Alabama game, but pushed his official visit back to December. His mom played softball here at Tennessee. He's out on the West Coast. It's way too early to talk about front runners for him, from my understanding. But I think Tennessee's in the mix there. And this weekend they have Nate Ament coming in, who's another 5-star, highly ranked 4-star, one of the best players in the country, a post player. I think that one depends on what happens with Chris Cenac. I don't envision Cenac and Ament both coming. They're both post players. They're both not going to come to Tennessee. So you probably, in an ideal world, would like to get one or the other. So Tennessee's going to reload. I mean, if you're able,
Caleb, the 5-star wing, Caleb, what is it?
Caleb Wilson. No. I don't envision
that
one. I don't see that one. There's a lot of Kentucky, North Carolina buzz. So if you're able to land a good portion of the guys that I talked about, and I believe it's very realistic that you land a good portion, if not the majority, then that's one of the best recruiting classes in the country, paired with that core we talked about returning. Yeah. And they'll be able to go into the portal and attract an Igor Milicic, a Chaz Lanier. And if you're able to kind of piece all those parts, the returning core, the high school class, and the transfer class, then that's a team that's going to be that top 25 team in the country that we talked about.
Just different era. Like, it's just going to look very, very different. And like you said, this is probably, it feels like this is the last reload and get ready to contend for Barnes. But, it's a good run. And we'll see what happens this year, because I think you can make the case this is the most talented overall team Barnes has had since he's been at Tennessee. But we'll see how it all plays out. Final thing, and I'll get you out of here, Ben. How do you see right now, we're taping this on a Thursday, what is your gut on how Tennessee-Alabama goes on Saturday?
I think it's going to be ugly. That's what I
don't know. Fans don't want to hear this. They're tired of the ugly. They're so tired. Like they I don't know if you feel the same, but I think there's just something about winning with defense that, regardless of when fans say they want to win with defense, in practicality, you watch it and you're like, oh, I lied. I actually, give me back the 75th scoring defense in 2022 and the #1 offense. That was a lot more fun. We enjoyed that a lot more. I just feel like that's always going to be the case with fans. They think that's what they want, and then you get the broccoli on the plate, and you're like, all right, this is what you wanted. You wanted a defense you wanted a real defense, and they're like, no. Yeah, we misunderstood. We misunderstood the assignment. That's enough. Let's drop that down to 40th and give us a top 10 offense again. Well, that's what I feel like fans want right now.
Oh, it's absolutely what fans want. Any sport, I think, football, basketball, baseball. Maybe fans won't admit it, but they want to be entertained, and I don't think that they realize that. And it's baffling to me how people just try and devalue wins. It baffles me. I get the performance against Florida was frustrating. It was ugly. There were red flags, concerns, not a lot of optimism. But you beat Florida, a team that you don't beat that often. Yeah. I mean, this is the first time in my life that Tennessee has beat Florida at home in back-to-back games.
Yeah.
And I'll be 30 next year. So that's 30 years is a long time to not beat somebody in back-to-back home games when you play them every other year and they're your rival. So I get the frustration, but the devaluing wins is crazy to me. If Tennessee were to beat Alabama 2-0 this weekend, who cares? You beat Alabama. That's all that matters at the end of the day, is you found a way to get the job done. But I don't think either fan base feels very optimistic going into this one. It's funny. I went to high school in Alabama. I have a bunch of friends that went to Alabama and graduated from there, and they feel the same exact way about their chances this weekend as I see Tennessee fans feeling about their chances on social media and the message boards. So it's like, okay, Alabama's defense hasn't been that good this year, but Tennessee's offense, is it going to be able to take advantage of that? I'd be lying if I said I had a lot of confidence in them being able to do so. And then you look at Tennessee's defense, you're like, okay, well, now they have to go up against Ryan Williams and Jalen Milroe. So it's strength on strength, weakness on weakness, which is odd and tough to evaluate. But ultimately, I think it's a coin flip game, and I'm picking Tennessee to win because it's at home. If it was in Tuscaloosa, I would pick Alabama to win. It's just really difficult to win on the road nowadays, and I think that's going to be the difference maker in this football game is Tennessee having the Neyland Stadium crowd behind them. And you look at some of the underlying stats with Jalen Milroe on the road, he hasn't played all that well throughout his career. away from Bryant Denny. So I don't have a ton of confidence. I'd be lying if I said I did. It's simply going to come down to who executes better on Saturday, and I'll give Tennessee the benefit of the doubt because it's a home game.
I have the Galaxy brain take that I had this week, Ben, that just like, this is obviously stupid, but it's just in my brain this week, where I was like, so Tennessee should have beaten Alabama last year. Like that was brutal, because if they score one more touchdown, they convert once in the red zone in that first half, and they're up 3 touchdowns, they win that game. I'm convinced. There's no way Bama's coming out of the half like down 3 scores, fired up. They obviously have the big play right out of the gate here. They were like, oh, it's a 2-score game. We can get right back in. And they score immediately. It's a 1-score game. And then you're like, oh, God, here it goes. Like, you could just feel it all, the momentum shift. The vibes would have just been very different at the end of that first half. And Tennessee's played Bama extremely well all 3 times in the Heupel era. Here's my Galaxy brain, where I'm like, they're going to miss Tommy Reese and Nick Saban at home. Like, they're going to miss, because I think this offense, the highs of the Milroe, Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Williams offense is better than what Tennessee saw last year. I mean, that Reese offense was rough. Like, they really struggled up until that last little bit of the season. I mean, even the Michigan game wasn't good for Alabama in the college football playoff. Like, the way they beat Georgia was really just kind of ugly, kind of the ugly football where their trench warfare just out-trenched Georgia in that game. I think they're going to kind of miss not having Tommy Reese in the building. Like, they're going to miss not having Nick Saban, and that offense gave him problems over 3 years. And I don't know. It's funny that both fans just have no idea what to, like, I think both writers, you and I, like, we're all looking at this and I'm like, I don't know. I've been asked, I'm like, you could tell me Tennessee wins big. You could tell me Tennessee loses big. You could tell Tennessee wins close. I'd believe you, because I have zero read on where this game's going to go on Saturday. And that's kind of fun going into it, where you're like, I really have no idea. And it's not good radio or anything when we're jumping on stuff where it's like, look, man, I don't know. Like, I didn't think this offense would struggle to this degree. I thought this defense would be this good coming out of the year, but I don't know. No read whatsoever.
Yeah, I felt like a dummy in my interviews this week. Hey, what's the biggest matchup in Tennessee's favor, or what's the key to Tennessee winning? Who do you think's gonna win? I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see. My thing is, like, it's literally gonna boil down to who executes better on Saturday. That's literally what it's gonna boil down to. And anybody on my dad, my 2-year-old could say that it's gonna come down to who executes better this weekend. I know that's super simplistic, but it's in the sense of, like, there are games that you play against lesser opponents to where if you didn't execute as well, you could still walk out of there with a win. That's not this type of game. Like, if you don't execute, you are going to lose. Now, maybe it might be who executes less off inside of Neyland Stadium, because, again, neither fan base feels good about their teams executing this weekend. But who's going to be on Saturday? That's what it's going to boil down to me. I don't think it's a Galaxy brain take. I'm with you. I kind of view it from the defensive side for Alabama. The fact that Malachi Moore, after he got done throwing his temper tantrum at Vanderbilt, was complaining that week to the media about how he asked Kane Womack to get the play call in quicker. Tells you all you need to know about where Alabama is at defensively. Yeah. But like I said a couple of minutes ago, who feels good about Tennessee's offense right now, especially at tackle? Because to me, that's the biggest issue for both teams. There are other issues, but the biggest for both teams, you look at Alabama's loss to Vanderbilt, you look at a game they should have lost to against South Carolina. South Carolina peed that one down the drain. They got pushed around at the line of scrimmage in the trenches. Alabama did. And same with Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee has several issues on offense. The root of their issues is the offensive line, specifically tackle play. So you look at the defense of Alabama and think, boy, do they have issues based off of how they're acting, how they're playing. There's a lot of talk this week about the confusion of Kane Womack's defense and how the Alabama players have been slow to react to things that they're seeing, their eyes being in the wrong places, all coaching points that are just not being taken care of. They're not well coached, essentially, which would give you hope if you're a Tennessee fan, but then you remember Tennessee's tackle situation and the inconsistency along the interior of the line and Nico's missed throws, the receiver drops, including Chaz Nimrod.
But he's open. Chaz, I said on the pod with Ryan and the trader Ryan and Jack this week, where I was like, he's the ultimate glass half full, glass half empty guy, because glass half full is Chaz Nimrod's open all the time. Like, he's running open. Like, I think he had five of 10 incompletions from Nico in that game on Saturday was with Chaz. But he's throwing to him because Chaz is getting open. They're just not completing. So he's a glass half full, half empty guy. Is that Chaz actually? I don't know. I don't know. I haven't. This is a big week for Chaz because I think Squirrel's still banged up, and I think Chaz is going to get more opportunities in the slot on Saturday.
I think so too. And this all goes back to Chaz doesn't get the talk that he deserves. It's not that anybody thinks Squirrel is bad or anything along those lines. That's not the case. It's just I think Chaz is better than people realize. And up until this last game, Chaz was catching passes and Squirrel was dropping them every now and then. So I think Tennessee has two nice, solid receivers there in the slot. I think it's why Chaz has played somewhat close to the same amount of snaps as Squirrel throughout the season. He certainly did not play well on Saturday. Too many balls on the ground, obviously, and Squirrel stepped up and started making some of the catches that he had dropped early in the year. So that was good to see. And of course, it takes him separating his shoulder essentially to consistently catch the football. But yeah, Tennessee's receivers need to step up as well. Nico needs to hit some of those passes, and the receivers need to step up. Everybody needs to step up on offense.
Yeah. They need Dante healthy. That was another just absence of Dante just not being around. And then you see immediately when he's in the game at the end, you're just like, he's been your best receiver. You had a great take, like the offseason of like the Javonte Payton thing. I mean, he's been better than even Javonte. Like he is a big play threat every time he touched the ball. And this is a matchup tailor-made for Dante Thornton. He's got to play a bunch of snaps. Like Dante Thornton has to be with the first group. He has to be in the opening script. Like Dante Thornton has to be one of your first three guys.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. It's just, is that knee healthy that he kind of tweaked at Arkansas? And that's why he was only playing in emergency situations on Saturday, which is why
Saturday's an emergency, Ben. I've declared emergency.
I agree.
Like you got to win on Saturday. He's got to play.
I agree. But see, the thing is, like, there's a lot of receivers I want to see more of. Like, I want to see more Mike Matthews. I want to see more Chris Brazzell. But then, like, are you taking Brew McCoy off the field? Are you taking Squirrel off the field?
Well, what's up with Brew's hand? Like, he's not really targeted. He did a jet sweep and not really looked at. So you're like, well, if we're not doing the screens to his side where he's blocking, what is the point of Brew getting these snaps right now?
I agree. I totally agree. If he is that limited, then you got to get somebody else out there. It sucks, but you just do, because there appears to be other capable guys that can get the job done.
Especially if you're going to hype up depth all offseason, and then you're not going to play that depth when the injuries pop up. Like, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, so we'll see. It's so odd. Like, I have zero. If I'm being honest, I have zero confidence in Tennessee's offensive line. But like, I do agree with Josh Heupel. Like, it feels close. They're just a hair off here and there, and he summed it up perfectly after the game against Florida. Of like, everybody's taking their turn. When it's not the offensive line, it's Nico. When it's not the offensive line or Nico, it's the receivers. When it's not any of those guys, it's the running backs breaking down in pass protection trying to pick up a blitz. It's they never have all 11 guys doing what they're supposed to do on the same play. Yeah, it's always somebody breaking down. So I guess that's a good thing that you're kind of close. Heupel said that they have guys who have done it before. That gives him hope and confidence. But all the cards need to be on the table this weekend, because I think you need a win to settle the fan base down a little bit. Not in terms of being on the hot seat or anything, but just the gnashing of teeth, I guess. A win would be big in that regard.
Even if you lose and the offense is rolling, I think the fans would be okay. Like, if it's a close loss, but the offense feels like it's getting on track, I think fans could live with that.
Yeah, I think so too. And then obviously playoff hopes are on the line, and not that they'll be completely eliminated, but in a way it's a playoff game as well. So I think all cards need to be on deck this week. And if the offense can find any signs of life and the defense continues to play the way that it has, then I think Tennessee will pull it off on Saturday. And again, to me, this is all about who's the home team. They'll win on Saturday. I think it's that evenly matched.
I'm leaning that way too, but I need to see it. Final thing, and we'll go here, Ben. What can the good folks check out from you over at GoVols247 this week? And also, how many carries is Dylan Sampson away from already passing Jalen Wright's entire 2023 rushing total?
Was this a trivia question? Do you already know the answer?
I do know the answer. I was looking at it yesterday, and I was like, oh, this might be something to circle to monitor the rest of the way here. We're at the halfway point.
So how many carries or how many yards?
Carries.
Carries? I would say Dylan's at what? Like 78?
A lot more than that.
A lot more?
Yeah, a lot more.
Really? He's in
the hundreds. I'll go ahead and tell you. Dylan Sampson's in the hundreds already.
Okay. Like 133?
Not that high. So Jalen Wright, he will only need 20 carries. So if Dylan Sampson gets 20 carries on Saturday, he will pass Jalen Wright's entire carry load from 2023. And we looked at 2023 of like, man, that offense runs through Jalen. Jalen's just a workhorse. Jalen's doing this. Jalen was awesome. You're already at the halfway point. That's when people are like, we got to run the ball more. I'm like, what are you looking at? Like, Dylan Sampson, if you're trying to think CFP, you have to start thinking long-term here. You have to think like, hey, we got to have this guy, like he's our offensive MVP, but if we're thinking college football playoff, this guy cannot be like just out of gas by the time December, January rolls around because we used him so much to get to there. I'm like, yeah, it sounds great in theory. Like, let's run the ball and let's run through Dylan Sampson. I'm like, are y'all keeping up with these totals and all these yards after contact? Because the line, he's getting hit immediately and having to do a bunch of stuff. Dylan's a dog and he's a warrior for this Tennessee team. But man, like I don't think people understand the context for where Dylan's at in terms of his workload right now. I don't think it's sustainable at the running back spot with what he's dealing with.
Yeah, that is a concern. There's no doubt about that. I guess in order to get to those December and January playoff games, you have to win now. Yeah. And winning now and obviously involves Dylan Sampson quite a bit. But it's certainly a concern. I didn't know if some of those early cupcake games had held down his total carries on the year. That's why I undershot him by quite a bit. I also did not realize that's crazy how close he is to Jalen Wright. And of course, Jalen was, whether he should have been or not, he was splitting carries with Jabari Small and Sampson himself. So that is a contributing factor. And I think they like Bishop, but Bishop isn't where Sampson was last year, where Jabari Small was, or obviously where Jalen Wright was. So that's fascinating. Certainly a concern moving forward. And it's why you need the passing game to get going, to take pressure off of D-Samp.
Go Vols247. Go subscribe today. Keep up with all of Ben's great coverage, baseball, basketball, football. He's doing it all over there at Go Vols247. So keep up the great work, my friend, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Absolutely happy to do so anytime, Chase. Appreciate you, and hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.